Go. Erev Tov, good evening. Baruch haba, welcome. Shalom. This is our Tree of Life class. And we're studying Yesod on the Tree of Life. Yesod is foundation. And we're studying the Tzaddik in Yesod. We're not going to go back over what we've already studied because we've been there for quite a while and we need to move on. But that the Tzaddik is that Tselem Elohim is in the image of God, and so we're following in His footsteps. Derech Hashem, we follow in the path of God, so that we're in His footsteps. And so if you need to go back and rehearse it, Philippians, or you can go back and look at the previous teaching on either Facebook or on YouTube. But Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 8, that He emptied Himself. And so basically the idea is that Mashiach, Yeshua, is following in the image of God, is in the image of God, that He is in the very likeness of God. He says, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. He says that he says, I do nothing of my own accord, I do nothing of myself. Those things which I do, I see my Father doing. He says, I say nothing of myself. The things that He says, the Father tells Him to say, and such as this. And so we're supposed to be following in the footstep of Mashiach as He's following in the Father. As He follows the Father, we're following Him. Everybody see how that works? And so He empties Himself of Himself. This is where we ended last week. That He empties Himself, of His ego. So that He may take on, that He might be the reflection of the Father. The only way that I can act like someone else, the only way I can be like someone else, is if I empty myself of myself. So if I want to start acting like Cody, I have to stop acting like me. Because Cody does not act like I act. I do not act like Cody acts. We're different people. We're different personalities. And so if I want to be like Cody, then I have to stop being like me. So if I want to be like Yeshua, then I need to stop being like me. I need to be like Him. I take on His attributes. I take on, in effect, His personality. I become who He is. Okay? This is very much understood in Rabbinic Judaism. That the Talmid becomes like his rabbi. Okay? The Talmid becomes like his rabbi. He takes on the personality of his rabbi. The reason why it is that he empties himself, it says that Yeshua empties himself. So this is an example for us that we should empty ourselves. We're following in His footsteps. So as He empties Himself so that He can fill Himself, He empties Himself so that He empties Himself so that He can fill Himself with the Father. So I empty myself so that I can fill myself with Him, with Yeshua, with Mashiach. This way, I am also, why? Because He's doing it, He's filling Himself with the Father. If I'm filling myself with Him, then I'm also filling myself with the Father. So in effect, it's trickling down to me. It's going through Him down to me. He's the conduit. All right. So The reason why all of this is important, and we've been hitting on it for so long, is because this is the secret to Netzach. It is the ability to empty myself of myself. To let go of my desires, my passions, my egos, my wants, all of these kinds of things. To let go of myself so that He can fill me. So that I take on His attributes. So the sages say that this tzaddik who is found in Yesod, this tzaddik who is found in Yesod, they say in him is found the infinite light and the life force of God within. So this is what we have here. Through this tzaddik in Yesod, the infinite light and life force is revealed. So this should be familiar to you from the first book from the first chapter of the Besorah, the Gospel of Yochanan, of John. The Gospel of John. So I need you to turn there, please. John chapter 1, Yochanan chapter 1. For most of us, this is a passage that is very familiar to us. This is a passage that is very familiar to us. And so we're going to read 1 through 5, and then verse 9. So 1 through 5, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were made through Him, and apart from Him, nothing was made that has come into being. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. Alright, so here you have what? In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overpowered it. The true light coming into the world gives light to every man. Now to start off this tonight, understand, and what we're doing here is we're looking at what a powerful force Yeshua is, what a powerful force HaMashiach, the Messiah, is, and why it is that I should empty myself to be filled with Him. Notice the formula that Yochanan, that John uses here. John starts off his Besorah, his gospel, the very same way that Torah starts. The Besorah of Yochanan, the gospel of John, and the Torah start off exactly the same way. Where does the Torah start? What is the beginning of Torah?
In the beginning.
Okay, chapter and verse. Give me book, chapter.
Genesis
1:1. Genesis, Reshit. Reshit is the beginning. So, Reshit in the beginning, Genesis means beginning. So Genesis 1:1 starts off in the beginning. Besorah Yochanan, the Gospel of John, starts off in the beginning. They both start off the same. There is a reason for this. Because the first chapter of Reshit, the first chapter of Genesis, is telling us what story? Is telling us what? Creation, the story of creation. Here, John is telling us the story of creation again. He's giving to us again the story of creation. He is simply rephrasing it. He's phrasing it a little bit different. And it makes it curious. And if you don't understand it, then all the more. because Genesis, Reshit 1:1 says, Reshit bara Elohim. In the beginning created God. Et kashamayim, that God created the heavens, ve'et ha'aretz, and He created the earth. Are you with me?
Yes.
So in the English, we very simply, remember we've talked about this many times before, Reshit bara Elohim, et kashamayim ve'et ha'aretz, that in the beginning created God, that the subject verb is switched around. You have a preposition in the beginning, then you have the verb, bara, created, then you have Elohim, the subject, and so they're switched around. Direct object pointer, Hashamayim, the heavens, ve'er, direct object pointer, and ha'aretz, the earth, Hashamayim ve'er ha'aretz. Okay, so those are the direct objects. So in the English, we'll put it here this way. In the beginning, God. With me?
Yes.
John does the same thing. He says, what? In the beginning, en el principio, now you have a verb here, but in the Hebrew that verb wouldn't be there, right? There is no verb to be in Hebrew. Okay? So you have in the beginning. Don't worry. Now, what is the significance of this? This is problematic because there are those who say, well, that doesn't really mean anything, that doesn't say anything, these kinds of things. But in effect, it does. And there's a reason why it does. So back around the time of Yeshua. Back around the time of Yeshua, there was a Roman. And this Roman's name was Onkelos. So everyone say Onkelos. Onkelos. He was also known as Aquila. But they say that this was actually what his name was, Onkelos. Okay? Onkelos was related to, there's a dispute as to whom actually it was that he was related to. Hang on just a second, let me. He was either the nephew of Titus or he was the nephew of Hadrian. Okay? So this is telling you what? Because both of these men, Titus, you remember Titus was the general who destroyed Jerusalem. Okay? And he's the one who goes after the Masada. He's the one that goes after Masada. Remember the fortress out there in the wilderness and you have the remnants?
Yes.
Okay? And they commit suicide rather than to be taken. Okay, so this is Titus. Titus. And Hadrian dies and Titus is recalled to Rome. I don't remember all of that, but anyway. But this man, Onkelos, is the nephew of either Titus or Hadrian. There's a dispute as to which one he's the nephew. He converts to Judaism. Why does he convert to Judaism? Well, the story goes that whether it was Hadrian or Titus, the emperor, whichever one he was, tells Onkelos, go and find something that is worth nothing today, but that will be very valuable in the future. And so he does. What does he discover that is worthless today, in the eyes of the world, is worthless today, but becomes very valuable? Judaism. And there's a whole story concerning that, which we don't have time for tonight. But he converts to Judaism. And he translates the Tanakh into Aramaic. And so this is called the Onkelos Tanakh. He also translates many of the teachings into Aramaic. And why does he translate it into Aramaic? Because Aramaic is one of the more popular languages of the day. Aramaic is a language that is spoken in much of Israel, is spoken throughout Syria, into a lot of Turkey, and all of that region. And so he translates the Tanakh into Aramaic, and then he translates what is called the Targum Onkelos. The Targum Onkelos. Okay, these basically are these are the Peshat. This is an explanation, the plain explanation, the plain teaching of the Torah. So he translates this into Aramaic. Onkelos is spoken greatly of by the Talmud. It's amazing how many converts to Judaism actually rise to the top, and the Talmud speaks very highly. There are several. Even Eliyahu himself is spoken of as possibly being a convert, as not being born a Jew, because it says that he's a Tishbite, and so they say that this is a sign that he's not necessarily from Israel, that he's a convert. So even Eliyahu, even Elijah, but there are many, and they are considered with great favor. Now, what does all of this have to do with what we're speaking to? Okay, so in his time, there was a custom in the Aramaic. In Onkelos, by the way, the Onkelos translation of the Tanakh is very highly regarded as being the most accurate translation of the Tanakh. Very highly regarded. So highly regarded is it that even today many translations, many Bible translations, Jewish Bible translations, look to both the Masoretic text and look to the Onkelos translation and make a comparison. And oftentimes they follow the Onkelos. So it's very highly regarded. So there was a tradition among the Aramaic speakers. And the tradition was this. So, you recognize this. The Yud-Kei Vav, which is the name. Este es el nombre del Señor. But we don't say the name. We show respect for the name, so we don't say the name. So rather than, in Hebrew, rather than saying the name out loud, what do? We cover it over with Adonai or Hashem. Adonai means Lord or Master. Lord. Hashem means the name. Okay? This is why in your English Bibles you will see this term. Where it's capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. The Lord is my shepherd, Psalm 23:1. The Lord is my shepherd. The reason why it is like this is because in the Hebrew, this is actually what is written down in the Hebrew. But even the English translators covered it with this out of respect. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
This is very, very important. Okay? In Spanish, ¿con quién? En español,
Señor.
Señor. Dice el Señor. Thus says the Lord. Okay? Is everybody with me?
Yes.
In Aramaic, now this custom comes pre-Yeshua time. Before the days of Yeshua, this custom was already in place. In the Aramaic, they did the same thing. In the Aramaic, they did the same thing. They used a cover word. And the cover word that they used is this. Memra. Everyone say Memra.
Memra.
This is Aramaic. Okay? In Hebrew it would be written, because Aramaic is written with Hebrew font, Hebrew text. Actually, Hebrew is written with Aramaic text is the way it actually is. Alright? Memra. Memra. Memra, what does Memra mean? Memra means the word. Okay, so do you see this? This is to which John is referring. Yochanan is referring to this. When he says in the beginning, Reshit says in the beginning, God. Who is God? This is God. Yud Keh Vav Keh. This is God. Hashem, Adonai. This is God. But in Aramaic, they would not use this term except for very holy circumstances, even as today. We don't use this term except for Yom Kippur. Very special days. Very special times. Okay? So we don't pronounce the name. Even the church speaks of the ineffable name of God. Ineffable. Unspeakable. To take care not to take the name in vain. So we don't speak it except for on very special occasions. Alright. So, Reshit. Reshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God. Yochanan follows the same formula. In the beginning, Memra. This is what he's saying. It's not just the word, but he's using the Aramaic here, Memra, which means this. This was not something unfamiliar to them. This was something that was very familiar to them. And onkelos, as a convert to Judaism, translates the entire Tanakh, where everywhere, every time this is written down in the Hebrew, in the Torah scroll, in the Tanakh, every time this is written down, rather than writing this down, he uses this. He uses, I'm going crazy over here, he uses this, memra. That's his cover word. Yes?
Why in Genesis do they use Elohim instead of that?
Because Elohim, first of all, God does not introduce himself as this until when? Sinai. Okay? Even Abraham did not know this name of God. Okay? How does he introduce himself to Abraham? El Shaddai, the Almighty. Okay? So, in the beginning, he has no name. He doesn't give a name. But on top of that, the sages tell us that the difference between Elohim and Yud-He Vav-He is that Elohim denotes judgment. Yud-He Vav-He denotes mercy. So you remember we talked about when they were getting ready to cross the Red Sea, and what Rashi has to say concerning this, that when the Shekhinah splits, the fire goes to the front and the cloud goes to the back, and then from out of that the Malach Elohim, not the Malach Yud-He Vav-He, usually translated as the angel of the Lord, but the Malach Elohim, the angel of God, goes to the back. And Rashi notates here, he takes note here, that whenever Yud-He Vav-He is used, this is describing the merciful attribute. When Elohim is used, this is defining the judging attribute. So in effect, when it says Reshit bara Elohim, it is that God is looking at creation with a judging perspective. How would we say a judging perspective? That he's already upset?
He saw that it was good.
Okay, he saw it and it was good. It's kind of like when you paint a painting, you see an artist painting a painting, right? And he looks at it and checks it out. Alright, it's good, right? It's like when we're working on a house, and we do something, we put in a kitchen. We'll stand back there, we're going to put up a whole house, and now after the house is done, and you stand back and you look at it, and you're like, wow, I did that, I worked on that, and all that kind of stuff, the admiration that you have for, and so it's that, yes, it's that kind of thing. Okay? So this idea of Mimra, what we're saying is that this is very common. That this was very common in the time of Yeshua. This is why Yochanan is using this. That this is not something new, this is something with which they were very familiar, because this was actually used before the days of Yeshua to, instead of saying Adonai or Hashem, those speaking Aramaic would say Memra. Something else that is very curious concerning this term Memra, and that is when it is used. This term Memra is used when there is a physical representation of God. Saying what? Does God ever physically reveal himself?
Jesus, yes.
Yes, he does. When Moshe goes up to receive the Torah, when he goes up to receive the tablets. The Hebrew there says that he ascends, not the mountain, he ascends to Shemayim, Hashemayim. He ascends to heaven. That's why he's in the cloud. What is the cloud? The Shekinah. Yes, the Shekinah. The Ruach HaKodesh. So he ascends up into the Spirit. Does that sound familiar to you? Rav Shaul says what? John says what? John was in the Spirit. He was caught up to heaven. Okay? You remember the story of Yeshua when Moshe and Eliyahu come down to him when he is transfigured, when he's changed. Remember that they are in a great cloud, they're in a great mist. This is the Ruach Kodesh, this is the Shekinah. When Moshe ascends, he goes up with Aharon and with the 70 elders, that they see God. It says that they see God, and the sages discuss this because this is very unusual. Why is it unusual? Well, number one, God is not flesh and bone, flesh and blood as we are. God is a spirit, and those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. So you have that, and yet it says that they see Him. And the rabbis talked about this, and they said, yes, they see God. But wait a minute. Because if a person sees God, a person who sees God, what? He dies. So, what do you think? This is why every time somebody thinks that they've seen God, what? They get scared, because what? We're going to die. We've seen God. And yet, why? Well, because it's this. Yes?
Can we pronounce Elohim
Yes.
even if it's judgment?
Yes. Elohim is the, it would be to the order of saying Your Honor. Okay? That's where he is sitting as the judge. And so it's kind of like addressing him as Your Honor. Okay? This is more that he's the king, but this is his merciful side. Okay? Why? Because what we say on Yom Kippur, Avinu Malkeinu. My Father, our King. So even though he's the king, what? He's my Father. Okay? So, Memra, the Aramaic word Memra, is used when there is a physical manifestation of God. So this is used with a physical manifestation of God. And this is what Yochanan is doing. Because what he's saying, there are those who say, there are some in the Messianic movement, there are some in Christian movement that Yeshua was not God, he was the Son of God, but he really wasn't God, and all of these kinds of things. But to do that, you have to ignore Onkelos, and you have to ignore all of this. You have to ignore everything that Yochanan is saying here. You see what Yochanan is saying here, what he's doing here, is very Kabbalistic. John 1 is very Kabbalistic. It's It is remez. It is hidden. These are things that are hidden that the rabbis talk about and discuss. Thus, you have the very strange, and to Jewish ears, it would be very strange. Even to our ears, it is somewhat strange sounding, where it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What's this duality aspect here? He's with God, He was God. And we want to say what? That our nature wants to say what? With God, was God, and you want to say what? Which one? Make up your mind. With God, was God. But we know from the Hebrew aspect, from the Jewish aspect, the Jewish mindset says what? Yes. Okay? That the Jewish perspective is not necessarily either or, neither nor. That it has to be this or it has to be that. That the Jewish perspective is, it can be both. It often is. That oftentimes what seems to be in opposition to each other are actually working together in tangent with each other. And so you have Yochanan, you have John going to this deeper level of understanding. This is why Messianic rabbis will tell us, this is why Messianic rabbis tell us that the Gospel of John, Besorai Yochanan, the Gospel of John is not the best place to take people looking for, to bring people to understand Yeshua. Because the Gospel of John is very Kabbalistic. And it's referring back to things like this. He uses phrases, the book of Revelation is the same. This is why people have such a hard time understanding the book of Revelation. It is a mystery. And many of the things they go on, this is why John writes about things that none of the other disciples write about. But he's going into what we would consider perhaps to be secrets, but not as in hidden things that are hidden away that you have to dig out. It is the honor of God to conceal the thing, it is the glory of the king to seek them out, to reveal them. Yes? And so the word memra here, what Yochanan wrote in the beginning was the memra. The memra was with God, the memra was God, he was with God in the beginning. Alright? So, what can we put in place there? This, because memra is the Aramaic cover word for this. So when he saved the word, he saved this. In the beginning was Yud-Keh-Vav-Heh. Yud-Keh-Vav-Heh was with God, Yud-Keh-Vav-Heh was God. He was with God in the beginning. Memra is also in effect, the creative act. The creative act. How does God create?
Speaking.
And God said. And what is the very first thing that God creates? In creation. Huh? In creation. What is the very first thing that God creates? And what is the very first thing, what does John take us to? All things were made through him. He was life, and life was the light of men. The very first act of creation. The very first day of creation. light. What's over there in the corner? The menorah. Everyone say menorah. The menorah represents the menorah that stood in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. What was the menorah in the temple called? It was called menorah, but it was also called something else. Huh? Yes?
Something like.
The light of the world. It was called the light of the world. Yes. It was called the light of the world. Why? Because they were to be a light to the nations. Ishahu, Isaiah speaks to this. They're to be a light to the nations. Yeshua speaks to this, that the Prushim would even cross oceans to make proselytes, to make converts. What does the menorah represent? The menorah, the light. What is the light? Well, where was the menorah found? Where did you find the menorah? In the temple. What's in the temple?
The presence of God.
Well, what's in the temple?
The altar.
Huh?
The furniture?
Yes, yeah, the furniture. And
The altar.
inside, what is in the temple?
The ark.
Yahweh, the Ark of the Covenant is in the temple. That should be the first thing that comes to our mind. That's the most important thing there. That's why the temple exists, is for the Ark. Okay? So, Yom Kippur is all about the Ark. In fact, the top of the Ark, we call it, in Christianity, in the church, it's called the mercy seat. Hebrew is called HaKippur, the cover. Which is why we celebrate HaKippur, Yom Kippur. Okay? Because HaKippurim, the coverings, the blood, the sprinkling of blood, and all of that. What is in the ark? The 10 Commandments, the Torah, the stone, the tablet of stone. The 10 Commandments, which we're studying on Shabbat right now. We're finished. We're going to do our last one on Shabbat, this Shabbat. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So, the 10 Commandments representing what? Just 10 Commandments?
All of God's word. All of His.
All of the Torah. All of the Torah is within the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are actually not 10 Commandments per se. In fact, it's not even called that in Hebrew. It is called the 10 words. These are headings. And all of Torah comes under these headings. Number 1, how many sides? How many tablets? How many sides? 2. Saying what? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. 2 sides. And all of Torah is divided into these 2 categories. Under these 2 categories, 10 categories. 10 categories of you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. The first 4 commandments. The next 6 commandments, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And all of Torah will fall under one of those 10 categories, one of those 10 headings. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
So menorah is shedding light on what? It's the light of the world. It's a light unto the nations, shedding light on what? What's in the temple? The ark. What's in the ark?
The word, or the Torah.
You got it. The word. Yes. The Torah. What
about Aaron's rod?
What about Aaron's rod? Yes, it's there too. Okay. But the principal thing that's in the ark is the Torah. Okay? By the way, really cool thing. Remember that this Torah is not the the 10 Commandments is not the original. What happened to the original? He breaks it, so he has to go up and carve his own out of rock because he broke it. The original was made out of sapphire by the hand of God. The sages tell us that the letters were engraved not on the outside, but were engraved on the inside of it. What is important about sapphire, that from the very throne of God, the foundation of which the throne of God sits, is made out of sapphire. So that Torah came out of the very throne of God. The throne of God is not a chair like this, the throne of God. What is the throne of God? We call it the mercy seat for a reason. What is the throne of God? The Ark of the Covenant. The Ark that Moshe made is a pattern, is a copy of the real Ark which was in heaven. The scripture says that God showed him, not God himself, but that the Memra, the Memket, showed Moshe those things which were in heaven. Who else sees the Ark of the Covenant in heaven? John, the book of Revelation. He also describes for us the throne room, the foundation, the sapphire. This is why we understand that John, his teachings are Kabbalistic, are mysterious, are hidden. All right, we close with this. Ready? In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. In the beginning was Memra. Memra was with God. Memra was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were made through Him. Now, we have a problem here. If Yeshua is not God, we do have a problem. Because it says very specifically here, what? In the beginning, what? So who's the creator? God is the creator. Yochanan is saying the same thing. In the beginning, Memra. Who is Memra? Yud Kei Vav He. Who is Yud Kei Vav He? God. You see how this goes? This is why John is writing what he's writing. But you need to understand this in order to understand why John is actually doing this. He's actually referring to something that is taking place in their time, in their day. He's referring to something that they are teaching, that they understand in their time and their day. And when he writes this, they know what he's talking about. They know what he's saying. He's saying, this is God. This is God. All things were made through Him. And apart from Him, nothing was made that has come into being. In Him was life. Why is that important? In Him was life. This is the final act. You have the first act of creation and you have the final act of creation. What is the final act of creation? And God breathed into Adam the breath of life. God breathed into Adam the breath of life.
So the breath came out of God, the life came out of God.
Yes. Your very life, my very life, comes from God. He breathes into us the breath of life. This is why life is so important. Because life belongs to God. It does not belong to you. It does not belong to me. It belongs to God. He is the giver of this gift. But it belongs to Him. So the scripture says, do you not know that you are not your own? You do not belong to yourself. This is why committing suicide is wrong. This is why it is a sin, an act of rebellion. Why? It's not your life to take. You say, well, I can understand where murder is wrong, where killing someone else is wrong. I can understand that, but this is my own life. No, life belongs to God. It does not belong to you. It does not belong to you. And the truth is, and I know that there are people who, you have loved ones and such that have committed suicide, and I understand that. But this isn't this is like an ultimate act of rebellion. And this is the way it is seen in Judaism, because life does not belong to you. Therefore, you do not have the right to just take life. For what? Because you don't like something, or you don't like some person, or whatever. In other words, and we're not talking about war and these kinds of things. We're talking about or putting a murderer to death and these kinds of things. But we're talking about, I don't have the right to go into a store and shoot you, because your life belongs to God. Nor do I have the right to shoot myself, because my life belongs to God. The truth is that in order to go into Netzach, in order to go into this area where we are, if you remember I spoke last week, this area of absolute surrender, of complete surrender to God, where I am willing to empty myself of myself, I must be willing to relinquish this idea that my life belongs to me. My life does not belong to me, my life belongs to God. When I get a hold of that truth, when I grasp a hold of that truth, it changes my perspective of everything and every person. It changes everything. Because nothing is mine. Nothing is mine. And I have the right to nothing. I do not even have the right to life. I do not have the right to live. Should God desire to take my life, He has every right to do so. And who am I to complain? Read the book of Job. This is what the book of Job is about. If God should desire to take everything I have no right to complain, because it all belongs to Him anyway. It's not mine. I have nothing. The house is not mine. The car is not mine. The bank account is not mine. The children are not mine. The wife is not mine. My own life is not mine. Everything belongs to Him. And He gives. What does Job say? The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. And we say what? Blessed be the name of the Lord. Baruch Hashem Adonai. This is the crux of all of this. This is why I've been taking such a long time in laying out this foundation, because this is the heart of this. When we get this down, then we can move into Netzach. When we move into Netzach with a proper attitude, a proper mentality, a proper perspective, then we move over to Hod. That's where we get our prayers answered. Say what? In order to get my prayers answered, not just the occasional, in order for God to answer my prayer. This is the realm of the prophet, where God does wondrous and miraculous things. The first thing I must actually do is relinquish my self-identity. I must relinquish this idea that I belong to myself, or that anything belongs to me, and accept the fact that I have nothing. I am the slave, and I own nothing. Everything belongs to God, and everything is by and for His will. Nothing for me, not for my sake at all. Everything is for the glory of God and the furtherance of His kingdom. That's why I exist. That's why you should exist. The purpose of my existence. What is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of my existence? The purpose of my existence is to glorify God. The purpose of my existence is for Him. I exist at the pleasure of the King. He is a real king. This is a real kingdom. Say it. He is a real king. This is a real kingdom. And I exist for and at the pleasure of the King. I serve at His pleasure. Say what? If He chooses that I should live today, then I live today. If He chooses that I should die today, then I die today. And I say what? The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But this is the most difficult aspect of this whole thing, of this whole scenario. And this is why Nitzach is so difficult for us. Why it's so hard for us to get into. Because I must relinquish control of myself. I've got to let go of the wheel. Completely. Not saying, okay God, I'm letting go of the wheel. Huh? My dad, sometimes he would let us drive the car. In fact, this story. We had a friend up in Delaware, Al Burke. He had a Volkswagen van. We would go to visit him. We would go to church with him. And since he had a van, we would all pile into his van. We spent the night at his house, and then we would all, Sunday morning, we would all pile into his van and go to church. And I remember one time we were visiting with him, and we went to church, and on the way home from church, we come out of church, we're all getting in the van, and I call him Uncle Al, and I said, Uncle Al, I want to drive. Can I drive? I want to drive. And he said, you want to drive? And I said, yeah, I want to drive. Now mind you, I was only like 8 or 9 years old. And he's going to let me drive his van. I was all excited. But he said, come over here. So I went over there to the driver's seat. He says, come on in, come on in. So I get up. He's still sitting there. He was a big man, tall. He was like 6'5". He was big. And I was just a little kid. He pulled me up, he sat me on his lap. He said, all right, I'm gonna push the pedals and I'm gonna shift the gears and you steer. That was cool for an 8 or 9-year-old kid, right? So we start driving down the parking lot, down the driveway. We start driving. There I am driving. I'm proud, man. I'm happy. I'm there. I am driving. He's doing the pedals and I'm steering the wheel. And I look down. And his knees, because he had these big knees, because he's tall, and so they're kind of like sticking up. And the steering wheel is in between his knees. And it's kind of like when you go to a carnival ride and you drive those little cars, but you're not really driving, but you think you're driving, you know? The little 5-year-old kid, 4-year-old kid, they think they're driving. They're steering. They don't see that rail in the middle that's keeping them from crashing, right? And so there he was with his knees. I thought I was driving. Who was driving? He was driving the whole time with his knees. It's a sad state of affairs when that man's knees were stronger than my arms. That he was controlling the van with his knees this whole time. What am I saying? You think you're driving? You're not driving. God's driving. The truth of the matter is, if we really trust God, we let go of the wheel. God does not need your help in steering. He doesn't need your help. What He wants is your surrender to His will. What is the very first prayer that we say in the morning? I gave it to you in the grammar class. We're going to take it apart next week. The very first prayer that we say in the morning, Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Modeh ani, I thankfully, I gratefully yield before you, living and eternal King. So when we understand that this tzaddik, that Yesod, John 1 through 5, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, Memra, Yud, that he is saying, this is a physical manifestation, representation of God himself. And they understood it at that time. They knew exactly what John was saying. So, these kinds of messages, these kind of teachings, they make me excited. And hopefully it will help you and me to be willing to relinquish ourselves a little more this week. Take our hand off of the wheel. Give everything over to God. He's in control. And let him have his way. Without any muss or fuss, without wrestling, well, just let go and let God have his way. With that we say, Brachot Shalom Le'Laila Tov.